There you go. So down there, go first. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And thank all of you for coming out this morning. It's a very important conversation to talk about some of the challenges we have to face as citizens of empire, addressing the issues of war, militarism, repression here in this country, and what our responsibilities may be in addressing that objective reality. I was asked to briefly talk about a very important situation that's unfolding as we are sitting here in this room, and that is the situation in Venezuela and the current attempts by the U.S. state, along with its European partners, to undermine that process. You know, it's interesting that with all of the differences supposedly between the U.S. and their European partners, we find that those differences are submerged when it comes to the common agenda of attempting to uphold and to expand what we refer to in the Black Alliance for Peace as the axis of domination. You know, they have all these little cute sayings. Bowman talked about the trinity of tyranny. But we say that what has been quite obvious to us historically is that there's been an axis of domination that is now about 500 years old. The current expression of that axis of domination is in fact the US, EU, and NATO. And these forces are committed to maintaining the power and the privilege that emerged beginning with the European invasion of the Americans in 1492, and the subsequent material development of what became known as Western Europe. So we see that even though there's been evolution, even though there are issues between the various countries today, as the Western alliance is experiencing all kinds of internal tensions, again, we find that when it comes to questions of European hegemony, that there's unity. And so we've seen that in the case of Venezuela, the US and the Europeans have been quite clear that Venezuela, for them, represents a threat. Now, we know that the threat has nothing to do with this so-called concern about the authoritarian nature of that state. We all are adults, so we know that that's basically political bullshit. That this nation has no moral standing to talk about authoritarianism, to talk about upholding human rights, and definitely not to talk about democracy. So we know that's just a pretext for them providing some justification for intervention in order to undermine and experiment a model that is important for not only the Latin America, Caribbean, for all of the Americas, but also the world. They understood and understand that Venezuela is the tip of the spear, if you will. That weapon that's being developed to hasten the final decline and disappearance, hopefully, of his axis of domination. Venezuela is key to the entire region. And they understood that if you could undermine Venezuela and its ability to shepherd and to support revolutionary processes in the Americas, that basically you can turn back, or they believe, turn back the clock of history. So they have, in fact, been doing that. The opposition in Venezuela, an opposition that has murdered people, that burned people alive, 29 people. This opposition received the Sakharov Prize from the European Parliament. Gives you a sense of their commitment to human rights and the value of non-European life. the Obama administration, for reasons that should be obvious to all, determined that in 2014 that Venezuela represented a unique and unusual security threat to the United States of America. Why was that? Were they prepared to attack the U.S. and undermine U.S. interests? What was unusual about that threat? Well, is an unusual threat because they are challenging U.S. hegemony, and therefore they marshaled all of their repressive forces to undermine the process. And they knew that they had some opportunities. At that point, Chavez had passed, and the plan was basically to marshal their resources to undermine the Venezuela experiment. So that's where we are today. The Trump administration, with that foundation, continued the process and intensified it. And because of the confusion among left forces, the liberal forces here in this country, sometimes you can't tell the difference. There is general support, and a net support, silence, which is support for these efforts, with the justification that, well, Maduro, it reduces everything down to personality. Maduro's authoritarian and all this kind of BS. And it confuses people because they are trying to frame their intervention within the context of these, this responsibility to protect, this manifestation of the white man's, the contemporary white man's burden, that these nations need to be saved because you have these elements inside the nation who just want to be like Westerners. And if they were allowed to develop without repression, then they would end up just like us in the U.S. And that resonates. It resonates. And so we have this confusion among the left that has allowed space for this people's movement, this experiment in Venezuela to be under fire. Economic sanctions and economic blockade that has now taken more than 40,000 lives. We're well on the way to a repeat of the situation that we saw in Iraq when they put the blockades on Iraq that ended up with 500,000 people being murdered as a consequence of these sanctions. So as I end, you know, we have a responsibility, in my opinion, as citizens of empire, to understand that we have a responsibility to try to put a brake on U.S. intervention, to connect up and be in alliance with the people of Latin America, because we are in fact part of the Americas. We sometimes forget that because we are in this North American environment, but we are part of the Americas. Our responsibility is to be with the people of this region and to put a brake on what many will see as the greatest threat to collective humanity on this planet, and that is the United States of America.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bahman Azad, who is an Iranian American. He's an activist for decades. And he is a retired professor from Rutgers University, and he is on the National Board of the U.S. Peace Council. And he is also the key organizer, I would say, of the no U.S. bases on foreign soil, which held a very successful conference a while ago, which I hope you'll mention. And so I give you our next speaker, Bahman Azad.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. This is the first time I'm attending the Green Party meeting. It's an honor to be here, especially since you invited me to speak too. I would like to just go over, add an addendum to what Ajamu just said, because when we talk about these countries, you can see very similar situations with regard to all of them. Syria, Libya, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Venezuela. There's some common thread going on here that has to be recognized if we want to be able to deal with the situation. Since 2011, we know that the military-industrial complex and U.S. imperialism has gone into overdrive, right? Ideas. And they have been attacking country left and right, and that is why we have come up with this term of endless wars that are going on. Now, with Trump, it was even one step, but they even put one step higher. They are going on a rampage in a sense. If you look at it, it's not just wars anymore. It's all sanctions on different countries coming out of the treaties, nuclear or missile treaties, threatening countries with shipments of oil or anything like Venezuela. They stopped the shipment. They stopped the Iranian tanker on high seas and all those things. All those illegal actions that are going on, and even raiding the Venezuelan embassy against international law. All of these are creating a really disastrous situation. We are picking on China right now. We are getting on Russia's case, right? One after the other, we are attacking everybody around the world. And we are on the verge of military or even environmental disaster, total collapse. And we have to understand that. And this does not leave us much time. We don't have time forever to think about how we get our forces together, how to work, how to plan, how to prevent. And unfortunately, our peace movement has been kind of weak. There's a lot of activity going on, not that people are sitting idle. Our weakness is not a result of a lack of activity. We are doing this, but there is some problems in the way we are doing it. We are too much fragmented. And I would like to say that because one concept we are missing in the middle of all of this is the concept of imperialism. Because that is the thread that goes through all of these cases that we are missing. Our peace movement has been responding to the cases as if each one is an individual case separate. First Afghanistan, then Iraq, then Libya, then Syria, now Venezuela. Upcoming is Iran, right? And we go through, we mobilize against these US violations only after they commit them. That's right. We have no preventive plan. We have to come up with one. Secondly, we have fallen for this good guy, bad guy model that they have put before us. I'll give you an example. When the US got involved in Syria, we in the Peace Council decided to organize a coalition of forces on a national level to fight it. You know what they responded to us? Some of the forces? Both sides are bad. Azad is bad, US is bad, we don't want to be identified with either of them, right? So the solution, sit on the fence and watch, right? We finally managed to send a delegation and it started another debate and it worked out and Madeleine actually was on it. But anyway, the same with Venezuela, the same with Gaddafi. This method of humanization of the leader that Ajamu talked about. You know, I remember in the 80s, Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes had a section of 60 Minutes that said, our media is capable of making an evil out of anyone we want to in 2 weeks. That was 70s, 80s technology. Think about it. Yeah. And they are doing it. Before we attacked Iraq, nobody knew where Iraq was. No, they knew who Saddam Hussein was, right? At the time, some people thought Gorbachev was president of the United States. But within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, they turned it around, justified the war, and did it. What we are lacking is that we're falling for this demonization process. And it has two aspects. One, it reduces a government into one individual, as Ajamu mentioned. Right? It is always US government in dealing in an international level, but it's always Putin, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Azad, Maduro, as if there is no institution, as if there is no process in that country, or people, nothing. Because that makes it easier to demonize. You cannot demonize a parliament, right, or a cabinet. But you can easily do it if you shrink it to one person. And that's the method they have used. But there is another ulterior function to this thing. By doing this, they can individualize the cases and hide the main threat that goes through all of them. Now, as Ajamu mentioned, war on terror, responsibility to protect, human rights, protecting human rights. Because they can demonize, reduce the government to one person, and the cause is not that person, and what is hidden is the imperialist drive for world domination. And unless we can link these all together and come up with the root causes of these aggressions, which emanate from here, not from those countries, we will not be able to overcome this. And we don't have much time. What I'm trying to suggest, from the point of view of the U.S. Peace Council, not individually, and Ajamu also, right, on the Peace Council Executive Committee, we want to suggest that we need a kind of a national, unified, anti-imperialist structure that coordinates our struggles and tries to come up with analysis of the current state of what the US is doing, what the European imperialists are doing, what is the agenda, and how we can prevent it. Because it always starts with some small troop somewhere, some advisor somewhere, but we can't be silent until they send the whole army and military in there before we can respond. We have to detect these moves that are setting the stage for them and prevent it, raise health. So that is what I wanted to suggest, because it's our movement and this is the place where to discuss it, right? And we should work on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bahman, for coming and speaking. Bahman is not a Green Party member. Yeah. And, we appreciate people doing that. Our next speaker is Carol Coakley, who is the office coordinator for the Mass Peace Action Organization, which is the largest peace organization in the Boston area, and part of an international network. She used to be a steward for ASME. She's president of the Metro West Peace Action Committee and one of the most active people I've seen in the Boston area. So I'm proud to introduce Carol to you, and I'm delighted to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Linda. I am late. A lot of people coming here today. My name is Carol Coakley, and I work for Mass Peace Action, as she said, and I'll talk a little bit about the work that we do. I've been working with them for going on 9 years, volunteered for them for that. I see a few people out here who are familiar with Mass Peace Action. I want to start with some good news. The House of Representatives has approved some positive legislation aimed at reducing war. They voted after 18 years, finally, to cancel the 2001 AUMF, and that's thanks to Bob Lee's tireless efforts. So maybe the revenge war on Afghanistan and Iran could come to a close. Now the Senate would have to agree for it to become law. The House passed an amendment by Representative Omar requiring a report on financial costs and national security benefits for overseas military operations, including permanent military installations and bases. This sounds a little bit like asking for an audit of the Pentagon. It's not the whole thing, but it's very exciting, and we'll see how far that gets. But it did pass in the House to audit this portion of the military budget. And the Senate and House passed a bill to halt the Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen. This was unprecedented, I believe, that they both agreed to try to stop this war on Yemen. And of course, you know, the president vetoed it, but at least it was a little step forward for the House and the Senate. We here can probably agree that the war is useless for resolving conflicts, but what do we spend on war? Our current federal budget consists of 3 categories: mandatory, discretionary, and a portion of it for interest on the debt. About 2/3 of our budget is for mandatory spending, things like Social Security, unemployment, Medicare. A bit less than 1/3 is on the discretionary budget, and the interest on debt is only about 6%. The discretionary budget allocates money for veterans, benefits, education, housing, energy, and transportation, and the military. More than half of this discretionary budget is spent on the military, and most of us think it is too much. Right now, it's about $750 billion. Do we really need a military and defense that costs $750 billion? I think we know the answer to that. Who are our enemies except the people that may be amazing for them? There has been a notion by some that war is good for the economy, but studies have shown that similar investments in non-defense industries create many more jobs, healthcare and infrastructure, and also certainly better outcomes. What we spend on war and war preparation is a key issue if we want to invest in important needs like the environment and poverty reduction. We spend $750 billion while people go hungry and have no place to sleep at night. It has been said that the money we spend on the military could eliminate poverty in the world. I'll just go over these numbers one more time, just so you get them in your mind. Our entire federal budget is $4 trillion. 2/3 of that goes to mandatory Social Security, paying salaries, subsidizing education, and healthcare. The other is spent on discretionary things like education, housing, science, education, and the military. So we decided by vote of Congress to spend half of that discretionary money on the military. I think we need to speak up and tell our Congress people we don't favor that kind of expenditure. A lot of us grew up at a time I did when we were constantly at war. There was Vietnam and Central America and Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria. And I think times have changed maybe for the better. Could it be we are evolving? I like to be hopeful. The enemies of peace are people who believe that strength is power, that war is inevitable, and especially those who profit from war. The corporate media likes war because it sells papers. So how do we make peace a winning issue? Part of our job, and we do this at Mass Peace Action, is trying to educate ourselves and the public. And now that the election season is upon us, we will spend some of our time advocating for candidates who continue to promote and vote for legislation and policies that end war and improve the well-being of everyone. When you look at the candidates for president, you'll see that several of them are talking about reducing the Pentagon budget, withdrawing from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. It is heartening to see that. It's been a while. Incumbents are being challenged by a new generation of citizens eager to turn away from the old days. And kudos to the Green Party for making peace and nonviolence a key part of its platform. It should be the basis for all of our work. These ideas are unusual in my lifetime, and I hope the trend continues. I believe our advocacy for peace has had an effect. I thank all of you for the work you do to make and enrich our lives.
Thank you, Carol, so much. I'm going to introduce myself because I'm the chair. So and I'm standing because I don't want to be in back of this whole thing. But anyway, I joined. Let's see, I moved to Boston in 1960, and I joined the anti-war movement and became president of the Cambridge Anti-War Committee. It was one of the first anti-war committees in the city of Boston, and then moved on from that to become coordinator of the Greater Boston Coordinating Committee to end the war in Vietnam. It included about 45 organizations at the time because every single campus had an anti-war committee. It was massive. And then we joined with the Moratorium Committee in Boston, which was the more conservative forces. but we unified. Everything in that time when there's an upsurge, the need is to unify. And we put over 100,000 people on the Boston Common. The march started on the Cambridge Common and marched all the way down Mass Avenue to the Boston Common. You couldn't see the end in sight. That's what those days were like. We are not in that period, obviously. So we have a number of challenges ahead of us. What to do about it? There's no more draft. Students are working 3 jobs. Families are working 3 jobs. They don't have the free time that we used to have. Rents are higher. All the anti-war activists I know were paying cheap rent, doing a lot of full-time anti-war work, and that's all gone. So we're facing those physical problems. But the main thing is this hidden empire of the military. It's actually 62 cents of every dollar goes to the military when you count all the appropriations that are under the board that they just do whenever they feel they need it. So they use that money to get their tentacles into every single aspect of our lives and our personal lives. They go and they control the educational system by giving grants to campuses, like MIT. MIT could not do what it's doing without that research money that they get from the government. Every single campus, you go just through them, there's a list. And I want to point to a book called How the Military Invades Our Lives, The Complex by Nick Hurst. Read it, because it paints a picture of this octopus with these tentacles into every single area, from entertainment to the media to the educational system. And what used to be called the military industrial complex is now the military technological complex, and the educational complex, and the research complex, the scientific complex, the homeland security complex, national security. They're all connected by this monolithic thing that takes half our money to spend to kill people. That's what it's all about. Control, domination, and killing. And they're coming up with more and more horrible weapons of mass destruction all the time. A lot of our money is going toward the research. So I think a lot of us know that, but Nick Hurst's book gives you the picture that most Americans simply do not have of how overwhelming this control is when they go to NASCAR and they have their little sporting events and so on. So we have to draw that picture for the American people because they can't even begin to talk about it if they can't see it. And a lot of it is like an invisible empire. So that's up to us, and I think that book really helps. Now, what I'd like to do is get to the all the speakers spoke about the challenges that we're facing as a very weak anti-war movement right now. I said 1, get the facts out. 2 is I believe we need a national conference to invite all the different coalitions. The anti-war movement is divided into Peace Action, into UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition. Then there's the Answer Coalition, and all these different groups are not working together. In the 60s, we forced people to work together. We had to blackmail them almost. And I'm not joking. You have to do that because people are all in their little worlds and their little sectarian things. And we should make a criteria of what is the politics of that. If we can agree on stop endless war, then everybody can bring all their little points of view into that one overwhelming thought that we want to convey to the American people. Have you read it in 1984 recently? Reread it. 3 spheres of influence, Oceania, Eurasia, East Asia. 3 spheres of influence that fight continually, endless war, and everybody knows they can't win, but they do it anyway to keep the proles in place. I said, you read this stuff, and I said, wow. So anyway, I think unity is key. It's what I fought for all my life. It's the only way we're effective. We have to break down these divisions. National conference would be helpful. And the other thing is there are 3 burgeoning movements that we're aware of. The immigration issue, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, and the environmental movement. Now they aren't coming to us, so we have to go to them. Just think in the September planetary events that are going to take place, we have to go with the anti-war message that the military is the most polluting entity on the earth. Huge use of fossil fuels. They have no plans to get off them. They are taking us on the road to destruction. So if we intervene, we can go to their meetings, we can go with material, we can go with contingents if there's a big immigration march or a protest demonstration or whatever. We be there with our signs again. We've got to go to them, folks. It's not happening the other way this time around. So that's a suggestion I have. I'd like to introduce Margaret Flowers. If you could stand, Margaret, as one of our courageous Green Party members who took over the embassy. We didn't take it over, you were handed the embassy to defend, and they did a wonderful job.
This is Ajamu. Ajamu.
We're so proud of the Green Party leading that action. And we have to think of the Green Party as leaders of the anti-war movement. Because Ajamu is playing that role, Black Alliance for Peace. So many of us are active. And it's up to us because the Democrats are pro-war and they won't let you talk about it. We are the only anti-war party. We're the only ones that are not front down, and we have to take the lead. So we have material here on the embassy defense. We have our comrades are currently under attack. We have to talk about that. Maybe you could add something, Margaret. And I see a speaker over here that would like to say something. Sherry Huntland.
You had asked me to make sure I interjected this, so I'm going to. Just real briefly, I appreciate the whole panel. I would just like to say a way to bring everybody together around more than just a conference is opening the day of the Democratic National Convention. We are not just leading a massive march July 13th in Milwaukee, but we're going. Poor People's Army is coming for its 62 cents. And we're coming for our 62 cents. And so I'm hoping that you'll be there with us as we claim that 62 cents. Because, you know, a little bit of it was talked about on the panel, but more people have died now as a result of the opiate crisis than during the Vietnam War. I live at ground zero for the country in terms of the amount of deaths. Now I'm chronicling, every morning I get up and I photograph somebody dying, being taken in an ambulance, and every night before I go to bed, I take a photograph of the ambulance. So, and our children walk back and forth every day. So the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's just a way to live life. And so war is war is war. I would just also say that, I mean, we just really, as all of these wonderful speakers do, have to lift up these two things simultaneously. And, you know, I would also say, like, you know, that's why you'll also find the Poor People's Army in the leadership in the forefront as well with Extinction Rebellion. because we understand that, you know, the other big wars are around things like being able to like have water and breathe and exist. So, and then my question is there an online petition yet for the Venezuelan protectors? And how can we make sure that that thing, you know, goes viral?
We are putting one together. Actually, we do have it ready. It could go online, but one thing we are waiting for is the email address for the prosecutor and some important key elements in the Department of Justice. It's not easy to find them. That is why we're looking for it, but the petition is ready to go online as soon as we have some information about the contact, because we want their offices flooded with that petition.
Okay, Mark,
Wait, gentlemen, did you want to?
And in the meantime, though, as you have on the flyer, we want you to go to the website. The first phase of this defense is to demand that they drop the charges. But as we are making that demand, we also have to prepare the defense. And because the government has committed itself to try to make examples of defenders, they're trying to put them in jail. And so it's going to be costly to have representation that's going to be effective. So we have to raise resources. We need to raise $50,000 over the next 3 weeks. We only have about 12,000 so far. So we're asking people to circulate information on this, asking people to support and donate, and help us reach that goal.
What is the electronic form for these going?
It's on the website. You can circulate the site, the link, right?
Yes, we're gonna set it up. This was prepared yesterday for this meeting, actually.
you can send people to the website.
We will set it up so that it will be online for download if you want to. Yes.
Margaret, would you want to add anything?
Which website?
The website is defendembassyprotectors.org.
Oh, here.
We're gonna have, how many do you have?
About 100 right now.
Okay, he has a flyer for everyone.
Ajamu.
Okay,
And there's some extra.
I'd like to encourage everybody, I'm gonna take a stack after Margaret and everybody keep their remarks to 2 minutes, so we can go on.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Bahman and Ajamu for spearheading the Defense Committee, and all of the Greens who participated came down to the embassy, particularly also the Poor People's Army that came down numerous times to try to get food to us and had to put up with these very violent, racist, you know, pro-coup people who were assaulting our folks outside. I don't want to comment on that other than to say that a big part of this defense committee is to keep the fight going. We don't want this to turn inward and be about us. I mean, we knew the risks that we were taking, and if we have to serve some jail time, we'll serve some jail time. But we have to keep the fight up against the economic measures that the U.S. is using against the Venezuelans, which are killing tens of thousands of Venezuelans, and the ongoing attempts to overthrow the Maduro government. So the part of the Defense Committee is to keep that struggle going, and I think that really want to elevate that piece of it. But Linda, you brought up a really important point about unifying the peace movement. And over the past few years, we've been working to unify the peace movement, and I was wondering if perhaps Bahman and Ajamu could comment on the upcoming People's Mobilization to stop the U.S. war machine and save the planet, which is focused on making that connection between U.S. militarism and the climate crisis, as well as the lawlessness of the United States, disregard for international law in so many ways, and we'll be elevating that as well through the People's Movement.
Okay, Bobby, one.
I just wanted to add another dimension to what Margaret said. It's not just a fundraising campaign. This committee is not just that. It is also a political campaign and a legal campaign. So this is the whole legal case of the United States government against these people is turning the international law upside down. They were the protectors. The US government, which had no authority, legitimacy to enter that premise, entered it illegally against international law. Now they are charging these people with interfering with the protective functions of the state, as if they are the occupiers and the government is trying to protect, which was the opposite actually. So in a sense, this campaign is also about exposing this big lie. That it helps the legal case also. Because we have to show that the government is at fault with this, not those people. And that requires a good amount of propaganda on the part of all of us to convince people that this is the story. We have to explain and let them know that the government is just playing a trick on this one. And we have to expose that. As a result, I'm asking you to please, if you find any good article, and you write a good article about this case, please send it to our email address on the flyer, and we will post it on the website. We want to really continue with the political side of this story too, as Margaret emphasized, because that's a key to the success of legal case. So that's good.
Can we pass a hat? Is that legal? To do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Has anyone got a hat? It's got a hat. Have your hat for them? This guy here.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Just getting going around.
I'm wearing the church basket. We have to have it here.
We got a good one.
You got a hat. Well, that's a really That's a better hat. Okay, let's keep going here. I'm gonna take a stab. Okay, I'll go from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll start there, okay? So 1, 2 minutes.
It has been noted that the volunteer draft that we have in this country is largely what has known the peace movement in Vietnam. And it has also been noted that volunteer army would not be working without the extreme inequality in this country. A number of people, including myself, think this is not a coincidence. If we can locate a smoking gun to prove that assertion, we could do, I think, at the national level of this country, what we saw happen in Puerto Rico quite recently. Thoughts about this would be of interest to you.
Okay, next.
We're gonna take all the questions.
Yes. Yeah.
When I ran for US Senate last year, as a Green, I was challenging one of the biggest warmongers on the Democratic Party side, Senator Bob Menendez. And I was told by people who were concerned that Republicans not win that seat or other seats, that war, why was I focusing on war as an issue? Because it was a distraction. The issue of war is a distraction. And what drew me to this workshop was the title, that war is the issue. And I'd like to hear a little bit more from the panel about how to make war the issue and stand up to Democrats, so-called progressive Democrats, who think that war is these issues are a distraction. I know why they think it's a distraction, because both parties agree. But we need more ammunition or arguments, not ammunition. We need more arguments to counter that. Thanks.
I think there's another hat.
Yeah, there's two hats. There was two hats.
Okay, next.
I just wanted to do a focus kind of, because I think war is not actually the central issue, it's money that finances war, and we have a war economy. And that is why we have wars. It's based on the money in this country is based on the economy. So, of course, my answer and why I'm in the Green Party is because the Green Party is a divestment from the war economy. We do not take corporate money. We do not tell people that. We need to educate people that the Green Party is more than just a political party. We're a divestment from the duopoly, and we need to end the two-party system. We're not going to end war until we do that. And we need to elect Green. And we give people hope. It gives me hope to be in the Green Party because of the 3.5% rule. People believe that there needs a mass of movement of people to change the system, and it does not. It takes 3.5% to change this entire system. So people need hope, and they need to understand that money is the problem. And we need to connect the pipeline, environmental people to the war movement because there's no separation. Pipelines are war. We're here in it for war and empire, oil and empire. That's why we're in these wars. We're in control of that. So we're not going to get the connection through the big green and the NGO industrial complex. They're not coming to us because they are bought by the Democratic Party and the establishment, the people that run these big green and NGO industrial complex. We've got to go to the grassroots people and meet them at the grassroots.
You have the bill numbers on those three bills. I'm always suspicious of Democrats for them.
I do not.
You had the overseas budget, Yemen, and the AUMF. I could get them later.
I did not write it down.
There's been one more thing. Wrong kind of green. If you guys have not gone to the website, wrong kind of green, it will expose the money behind all of this NGO industrial complex and the big green movement. And this is why we cannot get justice. And they're funneling us. They're funneling us into a controlled movement that does not really affect the establishment. Wrong kind of green.
I had two questions. One question, I need to say something similar to what you were saying, is that when we talk about endless war, I found something to be very powerful when you say $1 going to the military, with the dollar that goes to the military, each job created by the military, that same amount of money could create 3 jobs in education.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is a showstopper.
Yeah.
People can grab that and identify it. Moms, dads, children, everybody can, when they hear that statistic, it changes the debate whether you're talking about empire or this. Sometimes it's just a way to talk about or changing their idea about the military industrial complex without bringing Trump into the issue. It brings the military industrial complex down into their home community, education. My question was, what was the name of that book? How the military.
It's called The Complex.
The complex.
How the military invades our everyday life. And the author is Nick Tursey, T-U-R-E. Okay, who is next?
Just so everybody is aware, that the Peace Action Committee has submitted to the National Committee a proposal that the Green Party US support the September action. Okay. And just so everybody knows, tell your national delegates to vote for the proposal.
Yeah, my name is David Roldan from here in Massachusetts. I have 3 very quick announcements. So the Green Party Presidential Candidates Forum is tonight at 6:30 downstairs in the recital hall. I'm running for president. I'm calling to totally eliminate the U.S. military and weapons industry, and I know all the other Green Party candidates are calling for like very drastic reductions in the U.S. military budget. So that's one announcement. And then Sunday night, this Sunday night, 2 days from now, Margaret and Kevin Cease are going to be speaking about Venezuela at the Unitarian Church in Harvard Square in Cambridge, the one right in the middle of the square at 6 p.m. I think. And when I talked to them, they didn't know that Ajamu that you were going to be in town. So I'm sure if you wanted to come speak, we would like to have you to talk to you later. I'm in touch with the organizers. I could arrange that. And I'm sorry I don't have flyers. I will try to have flyers tomorrow. And then the third announcement is that I'm working with Cindy Sheehan on the steering committee of Rage Against the War Machine, which is going to be a anti-war demo at the White House and marching in D.C. on Friday, October 11th, and then a conference called the Revolutionary Anti-Imperialist Summit on the next day, Saturday, October 12th. That's like Indigenous Peoples' Day weekend, the weekend where we protest against Columbus Day. And so if people mark their calendars to come to DC, and if any of the activists here want to get involved or speak at the rally or conference, you can contact me. And I'd also like to know how to get the Green Party Peace Action Committee to address that. Thanks.
Yeah, I have a question. So lots of Greens are involved in the anti-war movement. How do we make it so that Greens are at the same anti-war event? And like, this is partially a problem with the anti-war movement in general, right? Like the marches on Washington, one weekend after another. But it's also a problem where Greens are involved in anti-war stuff, but like us in Pennsylvania haven't been hearing about it, even though we would like to know about it and we would like to participate, other than like through public means where everyone is hearing about it. So I guess like, how can we as an organization put the full force of our organization into this movement, showing up at the same events? And that resolution is part of it, but I'm afraid that we're going to pass a resolution and no one's going to show up, right? Like, how do we turn that resolution into action?
Okay, would some of the speakers like to respond to some of the discussion at this point? Have that happen? We'll take a few more questions after.
First, let me just ask a very simple question. How many people in this room are opposed to war and militarism? Raise your hand. How many people in the room are members of one of the national anti-war organizations or coalitions? Very good. We have to connect the desire to be opposed to war and militarism with the issue of organization. One way in which we have to elevate the anti-war movement is to, in fact, strengthen the organization. There's already been quite eloquent analysis that says that there's a need for more coordinated activity in this country, and we're moving toward that. One of the events that Linda will be bringing together some of the same organizations you referenced, Answer, Unite, all of them, is around September 20th to 23rd. That is the weekend of International Peace. International Peace Day is September 21st. And so we have a coalition in place that's organizing activities to highlight that weekend. That's part of the process of trying to establish trust among these organizations, the alliances, coalitions, to revitalize the anti-war movement. And it's connected to, the analysis of why is the movement so weak. I think the draft issue is an important issue. We know that basically you have one segment of the population that is fighting all of these endless wars when they do commit U.S. troops, and that is the working class and poor. If there were more folks from the petty bourgeois or the middle class involved in these activities, there might be more opposition to these endless wars, but they are not involved. The solution isn't bringing back the draft, but the solution, I might help though. I was opposed to it when I eliminated myself. I was in the military. But the solution has to be to elevate people's awareness of the objective interests involved in these wars. That basically the people's interests are different from the interests of the oligarchy. But the oligarchy will attempt to try to suggest that the national interests are in fact their interests. We've got to make that break. We've got to sever that kind of connection in the consciousness of people in this country. And that's why it's so easy for them to mobilize support for interventions. the issue isn't just money. Money, of course, is a consequence. People make money, particularly the military-industrial complex. But in fact, the issue, or one of the major issues, in my estimation, is in fact the issue of war, militarism, and repression, and the ability of the state to be able to mobilize support for it. Why? Because it plays on notions of people's fear, a sense of security, a sense that there are these enemies out there that the U.S. has to be prepared to defend itself against. This struggle for consciousness is part of the struggle that we engage in building this anti-war movement. In the Black Alliance for Peace, we're concerned about the issue of war, militarism, and imperialism. And we connect that up with the war we say is being waged against people, poor people, black people, working class people here in this country. They're basically interconnected. And so we say that we are at war, and that basically we've got to, it's one-sided war. We say that basically we have to organize ourselves, educate people, so people understand that our interests are the interests of the class and those of us who are committed to peace and social justice. Lastly, real quick, I would love to say we have an issue with too many marches. We just don't have it. Basically, part of the consequence of the, I would say demoralization, but part of the consequence of the anti-war movement being so weak is that we are kind of running out of energy a little bit. Some people might be a little exhausted. So we should be, in fact, marching every week, especially in light of what may be happening with Iran, what they're trying to do with Venezuela. But we aren't. And part of what we have to do is to try to re-energize the anti-war movement. And part of that is, in fact, making those connections with the other movements here in this country, so people can see the interrelatedness of this issue. And it's all about the state, it's all about the colonial capitalist system that is the enemy of progress, and the primary force undermining our ability to realize our collective human rights and the ultimate human right, which is the right to life.
Okay, I'd like to just announce we collected $300. Proud of that. I just want to respond quickly to this organizational question because the actions we, again, Cindy Sheehan had her own demonstration. There were 2 others in Washington in the fall. We called one in spring, the United National Anti-War Coalition, but it didn't come out of a national conference with those forces. And the way we did it in the 60s was to call an annual conference, anti-war conference, that would set dates that everybody knew about 6 months ahead of time, okay? And everybody was in on it, and they were on the endorsements list. That's the way you start to build the unity. As I said, we have to break down institutions. But the role of a conference where people begin to work with each other, and collaborate with each other, and learn to trust each other is key. And you hash out all your differences there. But again, if you have differences, let them bring their own signs and slogans. We're uniting on whatever we can unite on. If it's stop endless war, that's enough to get people in the streets. The last thing I want to say is I think this particular anti-war movement on every level has given up one of our biggest weapons, and that's the slogan of support our troops, bring them home now. A lot of people, I've heard objections, I don't go for them, I don't think they're right. They took our slogan. The military took our slogan, support the troops, because they knew what a wedge that was in the American people, to say the anti-war movement is the one that supports these poor working class GIs who are getting screwed, PTSD. We have to start talking about the suicides. We're the ones that defend those guys, not them. And we have to take that slogan back.
to add a couple of comments here. I think we're dealing with two levels to strengthen the peace movement. One is unity among ourselves, the peace movement, within the peace movement. The other is appealing to the public. And I think that should also be a focus of a very conscious effort to see what language, what issues would attract the public into the peace movement, anti-war movement. One thing we should recognize from the past, the public usually got involved when bodies started to come back. But the nature of wars, US wars and modern wars are changing. Many of them are fought by drones, remote control from bases here in the United States. Thousands are killed there, but nobody comes back. And that is not going to be an effective way of appealing to them. I think there's two other ways that we should also emphasize. One was the economic side, because every dollar spent on the military is sacrificing somebody's life here. We have to really bring to the public their life sacrifices that are results of this redirection of the US funds into armament. Okay. This budget that we talked about is almost 67% right now. And we kind of miss every time they give you the Pentagon budget. Nuclear weapons are under the Department of Energy. So you have to bring that part in too. And plus other things. It adds up to about close to $1 trillion. 67%. These are the things that we have to show to the people. We have to also make sure in this electoral process, the issue of war is put on the agenda. Everybody is trying to hide it right now. Nobody mentions it. You have to really bring it to people's attention and make war and peace an issue of this electoral process cycle. Secondly, I think the environment would work the same way because a lot of young people are involved in that. And if we can also show the link between the wars and the Pentagon and all the research they're doing for destruction and the environment and the fossil fuel that is being used. You know, I was presenting at one workshop a long time ago, and I found out that any of these tanks that the military is using to run through Middle East, they burn 8 gallons per mile, not 8 miles per gallon, 8 gallons per mile. And you dispatch 100 of them from Kuwait to Baghdad, you can see how much fuel is being spent. So we have to bring all these to people's attention. And the environmentalists, I'm sure, if we can link it, they're going to be attracted to the anti-war movement also. So we have to focus on those things rather than dead bodies and stuff like that. No longer is that effective. It's not going to happen.
Okay, we're really over already. I'm going to take, I'm sorry, I saw 4 hands before you, that's a little bit. Okay, keep it there. Cheers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. In answer to the answer really on military in relationship, I'm going to talk about humanity. In relationship to every dollar that Pentagon or military we can say we can make and support saving jobs. I'm a nurse for 2 years. That statistic hasn't changed much in the last 30 years. We also having been in the field as a nurse and enormous for insurances and taxes and stuff like that. So much, and as a citizen, so many of our first responders, whether we're children, firefighters, anybody in the reserves, anybody in trauma and helicopter relief, anybody who's a surgeon, anybody who's a neurologist, anybody who's a nurse, any kind of thing, and the service can be pulled back in. And so these people are not available to us. And that has a huge impact on us. So we can't support ourselves. It's all going to the military. I'm pretty good. Okay.
Yeah. Hi. I just want to make another link between the war and the war economy and money. Ajamu said the money is a consequence of the military. It's not. Money funds the military. And where does that money come from? The banks from 2008, the two big $50 banks that wiped out the wealth of so many millions of Americans, they buy the debt from the US Treasury. And that debt, when our government, national government debt, 22 trillion, is a war debt. And those banks are supporting the money that's going into the budget. It's not the result of it, it's going in. So I just want to thank you for that.
Okay, last two.
One is with regards to the Citizens Climate Lobby. How many of you know the Citizens Climate Lobby? Okay, I will ask you to go ahead and read their proposal because it exempts the military entirely from any of the climate actions. And it's all supported primarily except for when they call it a bipartisan bill because there's one Republican, but all the rest of them are Democrats. So read up on that entire list, spread the word. I'm in New Mexico. Francis Boyle from Champaign, Illinois, was one who worked on the anti-nuclear, calling it a crime against humanity. We are anticipating starting nuclear warhead kit production in 2 locations in the United States. One is Los Alamos, which has got 3 state roads that go into it, which I think are critical because if you ever wanted to go and shut down a lab, those are state roads and it would go to state court and not federal court. So, and the other one is Savannah River in Georgia. So if we're looking at anything, there's that. And then the other item is it's 50 years. Starting in October is the moratorium to end the war, October 15th of 1969. That's coming up rapidly, as well as next year we've got Kent State, Jackson State, and of course, what people don't even realize, we had 11 people bayoneted at the University of New Mexico, 2 critically, and fortunately they survived, but we have no memorial at our location, other locations probably throughout the country where bad things happened during that time period. It's a time period to go ahead and reawaken this movement. Thank you.
Yeah, 2 quick things. One, housekeeping for party business to our comrade earlier. I would love to see us embrace something like Keybase, where we can sign up for and we can get alerts on actions that are coming up from the party. I think that would be another way to try to engage with people or something along those. Maybe we'll
Like what? It's like Spam City.
Oh, you don't like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
We've had luck with it. I know
It's not organizing,
XR's using it and it's been successful.
Mm.
The other thing, yeah, and then the other thing to consider with framing everything, you got to be aware the military's been spending over $50 million since 2008 in video game industry with the war games and even things like they come across as lighthearted like Fortnite, stuff like that. Have those conversations with their kids and or relatives.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here.
Do you have any thoughts, like, about what we can do as a party?
Yeah,
'Cause it
you know,
seems like
in the,
people are
I was
involved.
also